Bobby "the Brain" Heenan is considered by many to be the greatest manager in the history of professional wrestling. Throughout his career, Heenan was someone that totally understood the assignment, talk up his charges to the nth degree, be the perfect nuisance at ringside, and eventually offer himself up for the cathartic beating at the hands of the protagonist. Between his witty promo style and his willingness to take exaggerated bumps, the Brain contributed mightily to any card he was part of. In his decades-long run as a wrestling manager, Heenan oversaw a group of premier villains across numerous organizations, but under one unifying banner. Snooty champions, rugged outlaws, unflinching brutes, pristine athletes, and looming giants alike all fell under the tutelage of Bobby Heenan, wreaking havoc on pro wrestling's heroes throughout North America. And no matter when and where these heels served Heenan, they all claim membership of the same unique club. I'm Jack from Cultaholic Wrestling, and this is the true story of the Heenan family. By the early 70s, Heenan had proven in various territories his mettle as a heel wrestling manager. Organizations graced by Heenan's fiendish musings included Vern Gagne's AWA, Dick the Bruiser's WWA in Indianapolis, and Sam Muchnick's St. Louis Wrestling Club. The latter was especially impressive, as Muchnick notoriously frowned upon managers but made an exception for Bobby Heenan because he could get anybody over. Though well-travelled and sought after, Heenan decided to make the AWA his one-stop promotion in 1974. It was with this full-time run that Heenan first assembled the Brute Squad that would become known as the Heenan family. The first incarnation of the family was a true all-star team. There was Nick Bockwinkel, the aristocratic and supremely confident star athlete that out-wrestled and outsmarted opponents at every turn. Contrasting Bockwinkel was his regular partner, crippler Ray Stevens, a genuine wild man known for his exuberant bumps and lawless brawling style. Speaking of lawless, this first version of the family welcomed a pair of outlaws in the form of the Texas-born Bobby Duncombe and the 6'5" Blackjack Lanza. With Heenan leading the charge, all four men netted championship gold in the AWA. Odd couple Bockwinkel and Stevens had already reigned twice previously as tag team champions, but they earned a third reign in '74 when they defeated Billy Robinson and the Crusher in Winnipeg. They reigned for 10 months with the belts before dropping them to Crusher and Bruiser, which allowed for Duncombe and Lanza to lasso the belts for themselves in the summer of 1976. The biggest coup for the Heenan family came in front of 6,300 fans in St. Paul, Minnesota on November 8, 1975. There, Bockwinkel ended the 7+ year reign of Bookerman Vern Gagne, finally netting the crown jewel for himself. Just as big a win as that was for Bockwinkel, it allowed Heenan to claim managership of a recognized world champion for the first time ever. And it was in the AWA that Heenan adopted his famed nickname, The Brain. Previously known as Pretty Boy Bobby Heenan, the star advisor had to come up with a new handle because Larry Hennig had all too recently used Pretty Boy for himself. As the story goes, Heenan prompted Bockwinkel and Stevens for help coming up with his new nickname, and Stevens offhandedly said, "Hey, you're the brain here, you figure it out." And so, Bobby "the Brain" Heenan was born. It's a good one as well, Bobby the Brain. Very concise with the alliteration there. Hopefully the Crippler got a royalty or two for that. On the flip side of things though, Heenan's derisive Weasel nickname was also born in this period, after the Bruiser referred to him as such in a TV interview. Further Weasel-centric prodding came from Mean Gene Okerlund during promos with Heenan, and soon enough, fans throughout the AWA circuit who were chanting "Weasel, Weasel" at Bobby. And Heenan was the perfect Weasel, seconding Bockwinkel, Stevens, Lanza, and Duncombe, as well as Bob Orton, in their wars with Gagne, son Greg, Jim Brunzell, Crusher, Bruiser, and any and all AWA babyfaces that opposed them. Some fans actually went beyond chanting simple insults at Heenan. In January '75, one fan at Chicago's International Amphitheater actually fired a gun at the Brain. The manager was unharmed, but several ringside fans were injured in the melee. And Heenan did more than just manage. He often wrestled in tag team bouts alongside his clients, while also subjecting himself to singles matches with the family's arch nemeses. The Gagnes, Brunzell, Wahoo McDaniel, the Crusher, and even a face-turned Stevens all got their claws into the Weasel's hide on a number of occasions, to the obvious delight of the AWA faithful. By early '79, Heenan decided to leave the AWA, feeling he'd been with the promotion a little bit too long. To explain his sudden departure, it was announced on television that Heenan had struck AWA President Stanley Blackburn during an altercation, an idea inspired by a recent incident in which legendary Ohio State football coach Woody Hayes was fired for striking an opposing player during a game. The Heenan family bandwagon made its way to Atlanta, home of Ole Anderson's Georgia Championship Wrestling. Along for the ride was Lanza, though a few new relatives would make up the new family tree. Primary members included the ruthless masked superstar, whom WWE fans would come to know as Demolition Axe in the late 80s. Towering ex-football star Big Cat Ernie Ladd was a cornerstone of the Georgia version, as well as unconventional killer Carl Cox and battle-tested Professor Toru Tanaka. Like with the AWA, Heenan also took to the ring in Georgia, ending up on the wrong side of beatings dished out by Tommy Rich, Bob Armstrong, Dusty Rhodes, and even a visiting Andre the Giant. Though Superstar and Cox both held the Georgia heavyweight title under Heenan's tutelage, Heenan departed the promotion within 1 year of his arrival. There were clashes with Anderson the Booker, whom Heenan claimed worked everybody half to death with a hellish schedule and treated people poorly. Fed up with Anderson, Heenan moved back to the AWA before the end of 1979, losing to Rich one last time in a loser leaves steel cage match right before Thanksgiving. Upon linking up with Gagne's group once more, Heenan reunited with Bockwinkel and Stevens, while also taking on Pat Patterson and Super Destroyer Mark II, the future Sergeant Slaughter, as clients. Eventually, the group also brought in Olympic strongman Ken Patera and the unflinchingly tough Masa Saito. One of Heenan's early rivals was a fellow manager, Lord Alfred Hayes, after Heenan stole Destroyer away from him. The two fought bitterly from late 79 to mid-1980, when Hayes left the territory after being kayfabe run off by the Brain. Bockwinkel was still in the same World Championship reign at the time Heenan returned, although he would lose the belt back to the middle-aged Vern Gagne in 1980. Bockwinkel got it back the following year, but only because Vern retired. Nonetheless, Bockwinkel was the AWA World Champion for much of the early 80s, ceding it to Austrian powerhouse Otto Vans for a few weeks in 82, getting it back, and then holding it uninterrupted into early 1984. Also in this period, Bockwinkel picked up the AWA Southern Heavyweight title for a few weeks as part of a Memphis excursion. New family member Patera captured AWA's International Heavyweight title on 2 occasions in 1983. During the AWA revival, Heenan continued his wrestling exploits in the ring, oftentimes getting humiliated by family targets. One popular gimmick saw Heenan lose weasel suit matches to Greg Gagne, where the loser would have to don the fluffy costume, tail and all. It certainly didn't help stop those weasel chants from kicking up. But a bigger threat to Heenan and Bockwinkel was an imposing youngster whose professional destiny was clearly whichever world title he set his eyes upon. Upon making the AWA his full-time home in 1981, Hulk Hogan was a certified phenomenon, muscle-bound and charismatic beyond all conventional measures. For the 2 years that followed, Hogan chased Bockwinkel's gold without success. There would always be a disqualification or an overturned finish that kept the belt from switching hands, much to the chagrin of AWA fans. The best they could settle for was watching Heenan get his ass kicked in handicap matches alongside Bockwinkel against the mighty Hulkster. By the end of '83, Hogan made the jump to the WWF, where he would famously change the business. He wasn't the only star attraction to file into New York as part of Vince McMahon's bullish expansion plans, as the top territorial stars in American wrestling started following the money trail into McMahon's domain. The following year, Heenan too cut his own swathe towards New York. He initially accepted an offer to manage fellow AWA alumnus Jesse the Body Ventura against the now champion Hogan, but Ventura was forced into an early retirement due to a lung disorder. Instead of the future governor, the first client then in Heenan's WWF family was the near 7-foot Big John Studd, one of the more prolific monsters that tested their might against Hogan. Studd was a sizable foundation for the beginning of the Heenan's Federation army, and one possessing lasting power. For the next 2 years, Studd dependably anchored the group as a very credible villain. But ensuing acquisitions didn't have quite the same shelf life. By the end of 1984, Ken Patera returned to the Heenan family, while Buddy Rose and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff also joined the fold. By the spring months, none of those three remained under Heenan's tutelage, however. Orndorff spun off into an alliance with Rowdy Roddy Piper and Cowboy Bob Orton, while Rose spun off into the role of the masked executioner. Patera, meanwhile, was sentenced to 2 years in prison for a 1984 altercation with police officers in Wisconsin. But Heenan still had Big John Studd, who, alongside Patera, forcibly cut Andre the Giant's hair in an early 1985 angle. The payoff from that saw Andre wager his career against Studd and Heenan's $15,000 in a body slam challenge at WrestleMania 1. Andre won, but the feud between these two mammoth attractions would continue. The next wave of fortifications was also quite short-lived. The eccentric missing link, whom Heenan admitted to not getting along with, only spent a couple of months in the family. It was the same for Adrian Adonis, who was trying to set his feet as a solo wrestler following the departure of partner Dick Murdoch. In the autumn of 1985, per storyline, Heenan traded Link and Adonis to fellow manager Jimmy Hart in exchange for another weighty bruiser. King Kong Bundy was an instant fit alongside Heenan and Studd, as the two super heavyweights quickly became standard opponents for the likes of Hogan, Andre, Junkyard Dog, and a now babyface Orndorff. Bundy also challenged Hogan for the WWF title at WrestleMania 2, losing to the Hulkster inside the new blue-barred steel cage. After Mania 2, the Heenan family would make 4 huge acquisitions over the ensuing 10 months. They'd lose Big John Studd when he left WWF in late 1986, but the new wave more than made up for his loss. Though now 43 years old and dressed as a king of dubious aristocracy, Harley Race added deeper credibility to the family in May 86. 2 months later, Orndorff carried out one of the greatest heel turns in history when he double-crossed Hogan after a tag team bout against Studd and Bundy. For the many months ahead, Hogan and Orndorff battled in WWF title bouts in front of sold-out houses all across North America. That November, Heenan acquired the services of Hercules from fellow manager Slick, following an amusing TV angle where, during the actual contract purchase, both men demonstrated their shady, untrustworthy sides. But the biggest pickup of all occurred the following February. Ahead of WrestleMania 3, longtime Heenan rival Andre suddenly turned heel, now standing in opposition of Hulk Hogan. The Brain convinced Andre that Hogan had been ducking him during his 3-year reign as champion, and now the Giant demanded his title shot at the Pontiac Silverdome in front of a reported 93,000 fans. WrestleMania 3 was a mixed bag for the Heenan family. Harley Race beat the Junkyard Dog, Hercules drew with Billy Jack Haynes, and Bundy failed to succeed in a quite bizarre 6-man tag team match, which also involved mini wrestlers. In the main event, with Heenan wearing a resplendent white tuxedo, Hogan famously slammed the 500-pound Andre, handing him his first WWF pinfall loss, and it was a legendary encounter, to put it mildly. Throughout 1987, Heenan was torn between adding new clients and incurring the wrath of old ones. A free-from-prison patera jacked up Heenan's neck during a televised quote-unquote debate, while a falling out with Orndorff turned Mr. Wonderful against his ex-boss in the autumn. Along the way, the Heenan family added chiseled Lothario ravishing Rick Rude and the formerly babyface Islanders of Haku and Tama. Come 1988, 2 giant holes were left in the family though. Bundy departed WWF early in the year, while Andre was sold by Heenan to Ted DiBiase as part of a $1 million plan of Ted's to get the belt off of Hogan. In the meantime, Heenan concerned himself with the Islanders' dog-napping of the British Bulldogs mascot Matilda and with Rick Rude's heated rivalry with Jake the Snake Roberts over advances made on Jake's wife Cheryl. Heenan bought Andre's contract back after WrestleMania 4 during a pretty curious stretch for the family. Race was sidelined for months with a hernia, so his crown jewels were passed off to a now solo Haku after Tama suddenly left during the summer. Longtime underneath wrestler Siva Afi was repurposed as High Chief Afi for the family, but he vanished quickly enough. Veteran wrestler Terry Taylor joined the family that summer, frequently condescended to by Heenan. The Brain dubbed him the Red Rooster to illustrate the point that he could take anybody to the top, regardless of name. Oh, and Heenan sold Hercules to Ted DiBiase because DiBiase wanted to have his own slave. Don't look at me, I'm just reporting what happened. As all of this was going on, Heenan maintained a ubiquitous presence on WWF television, broadcasting alongside on-screen rival and real-life best friend Gorilla Monsoon on Wrestling Challenge, and also participating in humorous studio segments with Gorilla on Primetime Wrestling. Their entertaining banter proved that Heenan was more than just a villainous manager. He was the funniest man in all of wrestling, and one that was extremely hard to outright boo or hate. Lacking a true tag team after the Islanders split, the Heenan family added former Horsemen Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard that autumn, together dubbed the Brainbusters. By early '89, Rooster had enough of Heenan's paternalistic management and initiated a heated split. To counter this, Heenan sicked enhancement talent Steve Lombardi, or the Brooklyn Brawler, at his ex-client. WrestleMania 5 proved to be a historic night for the family because it marked, after a whopping 4.5 years, the first championship any member won in the WWF. With an extreme assist from Heenan, Rick Rude defeated the domineering Ultimate Warrior to win the Intercontinental title, earning the Brain a legitimately painful beating from the Warrior afterwards. The gold was doubled that July when Andre helped the Brainbusters end the 16-month tag team title reign of Demolition on Saturday night's main event. Suddenly, 2/3 of the active championships were held by the Heenan family. But easy come, easy go. Rick Rude lost his belt back to Warrior at SummerSlam with the help of a new Heenan antagonist in the form of the returning Roddy Piper. And Blanchard and Anderson dropped the tag belts back to Axe and Smash before formally giving their notice to the company. They'd both be gone in November. That December, Andre and Haku, collectively known as the Colossal Connection, beat Demolition to bring the tag belts back to a now smaller family. But in early 1990, Heenan acquired the Barbarian, following a quiet split of the Powers of Pain tag team. After Andre and Haku lost the belts back to Demolition at WrestleMania 6, an irate Heenan accosted Andre and got pummeled for it. This was Andre the Giant's last real WWF hurrah, turning face at the end of his active Federation run. Down to just Rude, Haku, and Barbarian, Heenan restocked after Mania with Mr. Perfect, who quickly won the vacant IC title in a tournament final over Tito Santana. Unfortunately, 4 went back down to 3 in the autumn when Rude left the WWF following a pay dispute. Mr. Perfect exchanged the IC title with Kerry Von Erich in the latter part of 1990 before holding it for much of 1991. During that reign, Heenan sold Perfect's contract to the short-lived incoming manager John Coach Tolos before eventually setting Barbarian and one foot out the door Haku free. But in real life, what was going on was that Heenan, suffering from a neck injury incurred years earlier, had become very tired of the hectic travel schedule and was reducing his output to strictly broadcasting. The family name was all but put to rest, though 2 major incoming names are considered Heenan clients. One of them was Ric Flair, for whom Heenan was cast as an advisor from afar. Flair's winning of the WWF title at the 1992 Royal Rumble gives Heenan some claim to managing a WWF champion, the only men's belt in the company that had eluded him to that point. But a year later, with Flair on the outs and after falling out with associate Mr. Perfect, Heenan brought Lex Luger to the WWF as the narcissist. Aside from introducing Luger to the Federation audience, Heenan did little more than cheerlead the ex-WCW champion from a distance before Lex's eventual face turn that July. And it's worth mentioning, while we're talking about cheerleading, that commentary performance at the announce table from Heenan at the 92 Royal Rumble Ric Flair win, because my word, it's one of the most legendary commentary performances in wrestling history. 4 months after Lex Luger's face turn, Heenan departed from the WWF, burnt out from the road entirely. Through its accepted 2-decade lifespan, the Heenan family wasn't your conventional stable. In fact, calling the group a stable wouldn't sit well with the Brain, as he hated the term, feeling it better described as a haven for fly-infested horses. He insisted that his men didn't comprise a stable, they comprised a family. And that family wasn't always seen together the way that, the Bloodline or the Four Horsemen or many other collectives do. Sometimes there would be a group beatdown of a specific Heenan target, or they might congregate together when one of them won a championship, like the Brainbusters in '89, but mostly they were singular-minded heels that all happened to share the same agent. Nonetheless, the Heenan family goes down as one of the most impressive rotating collection of names in wrestling history. Kayfabe championships aside, 18 individuals, Bobby included, have been inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame as of this video. 9 of them are also in the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame, and the ones who could claim both Halls of Fames include Bockwinkel, Stevens, Slaughter, Ladd, Andre, Race, Flair, and of course, the Brain himself. The group's success in 2 major American promotions can be credited in part to the impressive names therein, but most important is of course the surname in the family's title. Bobby the Brain Heenan goes down as one of a kind in a business filled with imitators. There have been great managers, punchable heels, funny personalities, and entertaining broadcasters, but nobody juggled all 4 labels quite as flawlessly as everybody's favorite weasel. The Bockwinkles and Bundys, the Perfects and Andres all had the traits needed to be stars without assistance, but putting Bobby Heenan by their side greatly enhanced an already impressive act. Heenan made everybody better, client or opponent. For the better part of 2 decades, wrestling's best and brightest stars found themselves either in the Heenan family or in their crosshairs. At the center of so much rich, squared circle history was the industry's preeminent family man, Bobby the Brain Heenan. That was the true story of the Heenan family. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Cultaholic Wrestling, and I'll see you very soon.